Hey, Dave Miller here. For years, I've said jokingly, but with a lot of truth, I'm not that smart, but I have smart friends. And today's conversation is with one of those smart friends, Warren Bird. Just recorded it, warrenbird.com. You should go check out everything he's about. If you are a church leader, you undoubtedly have a book or two of his on your shelf in your library that he's either co-written or written himself. And he's all about statistics and studies. He's just a brilliant mind, talks to a lot of people, and I think you're going to learn a lot. I normally hold up this book and I make a joke with Warren about that. Well, who's the next you? I'll drop the link below. If you don't have it yet, pick up a copy of this. It's all about how to launch a sustainable plan. We call it a residency in your organization. I normally don't hold these up. For years, we've had this one almost since day one at Leadership Pathway. It is our coaching material. Along the way, we wrote a different version of it for the resident. So 20 topics, 20 soft skills, same material written from two different perspectives, the boss and the resident supervisor and the young emerging leader. Inside, there's a QR code. Each chapter comes with a set of digital helps and things that we continue to change and curate, and some tools along the way to help you have conversations with emerging leaders. In this conversation, after everything's said and done, Warren comes down basically to the same conclusion that we come down to, which is leadership development pretty much is talking. It's pretty much action followed by a conversation. And that's what I love about him and his work and his influence on me long before I ever met him. Long before I ever met him. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Warren Bird. Warren Bird of warrenbird.com. This is Dave Miller of davemilleronline.com. I'm kidding.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I have admired you. As I told you before we went on the air, I took your
Warren,
book on every flight.
I said it was $100 every time you mention it, but I can't. If we're going to do that in the first minute, I'm going to be broke if you do that over and over again.
Well, you've written a valuable book, and what you're doing is so important. And I'm delighted that our megachurch research found that what you represent is what an awful lot of churches
Yeah.
are employing and building on and using as their pathway
Yeah.
for developing leaders.
Listen, you've been so kind. You've meant a lot. You don't even know, and we won't go into it. If the people didn't unsubscribe after my joke about paying you to hold the book up, if they're still listening 3 minutes in,
And by the
you
way, it
you
was a joke, everybody.
you have said very encouraging things to me at very key times in my life. You don't even know it. One of them was 3 years ago at Exponential. As you walked by in the hall, you looked at me and said, "Write the book, Dave." And
Yes.
I had not jokingly, I had told you that people had been telling us to write a book. And I kept saying, why do we need another book? There's 7,000 books published every day, by the way, in America. Do we need 7,001? And you walked by and I came home and told Kristen that. And that fall is when we got serious about it and completed that book. So thanks for the encouragement.
Awesome.
I mean, I think we only lost maybe $9,000 at this point on that book. So we're doing great.
Kingdom work is
Kingdom
not
work.
about dollars. It's
Listen,
about
Warren.
influencing people for eternity, and you are training leaders who will influence other people for
Yeah,
eternity.
we're watching it happen at it's a small scale, but it is cool to watch the 29-year-old who a decade ago was a resident and now they've got one in their organization, which is very cool, which is very cool. Okay, I always try to start with a curveball question, even though I didn't send you any questions. We'll see what we're going to talk about, but I want to know what Warren Bird is learning. What are you
Mhm.
learning? What are you trying to get your brain around right now? You can tie it to this study, the Megachurch Resurgence, or just something, it could be left field. I don't care. What are you learning?
Wow. Well, I'm very curious. So there are no end of things I'm learning. Let's limit it to work where, I mean, I just had water in the basement, so I'm trying to learn tonight by YouTube
Oh
videos on
no.
how to solve drainage issues. But that's not what you're asking for.
I don't know.
In the
That could be
world of
helpful. That could be helpful.
in the world of church life,
Yeah.
um, I think this idea of the leadership development pathway,
Yeah.
how do you create it? How do you invite people into it? How do you truly serve and nurture them
Yeah.
along the way,
Yeah.
which is what residencies represent at a certain level,
Yep.
is is where our culture is at and moving. And in fact, I tried years ago to convince a publisher to let me do a book on residencies, and they said it's not a big enough market. Ultimately, it became Hero Maker with Dave Ferguson because that was residencies was just one of many models of how do I move people, how do I develop others, make
Yeah.
heroes of them,
Yeah.
and how do I help move them along a pathway towards being a better disciple maker and better leader maker,
It's fantastic.
all for Jesus.
You told
So,
me you told me that 4 years ago, I think, in our first conversation. Now, I remember you telling me that.
well, sorry to repeat myself, but
No, no,
it's
no,
good.
no. It wasn't on a podcast. I remember you saying it to me, and I'm like, yeah, it's not. That's interesting. I mean, and it's in that moment, it sort of gave me pause. But then I told you I wasn't expecting to sell a lot of books, and then you told me that's why you should write this
Yeah,
because you're not going to sell a lot of books. You're going to lose money, but it has to get written, and that was a huge encouragement to me.
yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, then we in this megachurch resurgence. So I could go that I'm curious about a lot of things.
Yeah,
This year I'm in the middle of the biggest multi-site study that
great,
anyone has done. All kinds of discoveries going to be
right?
revealed in October. And by the way, just announced the webinar for doing it. Multi-site revealed what 1,000 leaders told us that no one expected.
How about that? That's
And
cool.
just to tease one of the findings, we said, so how do you get people in your leadership development pathway, or some people call it a pipeline? And
Hmm.
this relates to residencies
Hmm.
in multi-site churches. And actually, I think the answer applies to every type of church. We gave about 10 options and said, so what? And one of those options was overwhelmingly selected. And it was the idea of shoulder tapping, which affirms that leadership development is personal and it's relational.
Yeah.
And, it's like, okay, Jesus, isn't that the way he did it? Follow me and I
Yeah.
will make you
Yes.
uh, in his personal appeals to people speaking to their worlds. You like fish? Let me show you how
Mhm.
to fish
There
for
you
men.
go. Warren, people say to us, and I know you've heard this too. I want to develop leaders like Jesus. I'm like, well, Jesus walked everywhere. That's a thought I've had recently. Like the time spent, you get 12, 13 guys hanging out, right? We all know what guys do when they hang out. A bunch of, what were they? 25 to 30, I don't know, 33 years old. And then they walk
If
10
that
miles,
old.
if that
Yeah.
old. They walk 10 miles to hold a meeting and heal a bunch of people and meet a lot of needs. And we read about the miracle of feeding the 5,000. But how long did they have to walk? We wouldn't need, if we developed leaders like Jesus, it would be so slow, right? We wouldn't need a diet. We wouldn't need a workout. We wouldn't need a therapy. We would have talked about it for all day together. But yet we're trying to get it done in an hour or 30
Yeah.
minutes or watch a Zoom.
And
Um,
Dan Spader in the book Sun Life
mm,
analyzes how, excuse me, how Jesus spent his time. And while we think about the feeding of the 5,000, all these big events,
yeah.
he says of the different pericopes, clusters in the New Testament, that 76%, if I remember right, were of not Jesus doing big events,
Sure.
but Jesus pouring into
Yeah.
individuals or small groups like the
Yeah.
12 or the little larger group, which included women and others around him. And that is astounding and very transferable to today. who am I hanging out with? Who, when I go
Yeah.
on hospital
Yeah.
visitation, who am I dragging with me? When I do this or that, who am I taking along? Even I remember the first time someone I was part of a ministry and we asked him to come speak, and he said, only if I can bring, if you pay for 2 tickets so that I can bring the guy that I'm
Oh, wow.
apprenticing along with me. And I'm just thinking, wow.
Yeah.
And we said yes.
Yeah. Why? I mean, I think I don't know. I'm not a historian. A couple hundred years, right? A couple hundred years, seminaries, colleges, maybe longer than that. I don't know. You could school me on this, but we've pinned it on education, the formal pathway of some sort of advanced degree, seminaries. And you mentioned earlier where our culture is right now. Our culture right now. Why is it's shifted under our feet, right? I know there's not a simple answer to this, but from what you've studied and what you've read and who you've talked to, where is the culture and why is it such a hard shift back to the local church versus seminary, formal education and these things?
Well, first, I am all in favor of education. I have multiple
Totally.
master's degrees and a
Totally.
PhD
Yeah.
research, and all of which gave me tools that helped me be a better minister of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
However, the research says that the more grounded your learning is in the local church
Hmm.
and in experiences in particular, the more you learn, which in many ways echoes back to Jesus saying,
Sure.
okay, you feed them, you do
Sure.
this. Or
Sure.
the disciples saying, well, why didn't this work?
Yeah.
Talk to us about it, Jesus. That especially the younger generations today want to learn by doing.
Hmm.
So even to reference your area of specialty, Dave, internships and the like, when I did a study way back when for Leadership Network on most effective internships and residencies, the ones that were rated the lowest were the sit and soak classroom. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
you come
Yeah.
come it may be housed in a church and we're going to pour into you and you're going to
Yeah.
read these books and we're
Yeah.
going to talk about
Yeah.
them, we're going to teach you from the Bible, and that's all great. But the ones where you said, hey, I want you to launch a new whatever,
Sure.
and I'm going to support you in it. We're going to support you, here are your parameters and how are you going to do this. And being on the excitement of seeing people respond to Jesus, being on the front line of disappointment, being on the front line of challenging to say, but I did everything right. And the person, walked away or dropped the ball or whatever. How do I disciple them? How do I train them? That's where the best and most memorable learning happens.
Yeah. It's great. How many people did you talk to for the Megachurch Resurgence? How many replied to your survey?
For the well, let's start back at the beginning. There are roughly 1,800
Right.
megachurches in the United States. Megachurch is defined as 2,000
Yep.
in-person
Yep.
noses,
Yeah.
adults and children,
Yeah.
on a typical weekend.
Don't
That
count that
is,
stream stuff. Don't multiply by seven. I don't want to hear that. We're talking about butts and seats.
and so that's the 99 and a half percentile of church size.
Okay.
And then if you notch it down one more to 1,000 and higher, a
Yeah.
thousand to 1999, so to
Right.
speak,
Right.
you're now in the 97th percentile. That's another several thousand churches, but that's still a tiny, tiny sliver,
Yeah.
which is why you have to do a specialty
Yeah.
study of
Right.
that group.
Right.
Because if you just survey, a bunch of churches, you're just going to get a small handful, that
Yeah.
99th or so percentile, and you don't have enough for a study. So we targeted large churches, 1,000 and higher in attendance,
That's right.
and we had 500 some odd
It's amazing.
participate, which is a healthy,
Yeah.
especially when you're asking them very personal questions
Sure.
like income and how do you do this and how do you rate yourself as
Yeah.
strong or weak in this area. High trust. And then that gives you enough responses to be able to say, all right, here's the trend. Here's if I compare this variable against
Yeah.
that variable,
Yeah.
what changes and so forth.
I mean, that's a large percentage of those churches. And if I had gone to a real school, I'm sure I could have taken a class on statistics. I didn't go to a real school. But that's a lot because you watch like the some news broadcast and they'll tell you 47% of Republicans are Democrat. And then you look at the fine print and you're like, you only talk to like 100 people.
Yeah.
The polling and there's 300 million of us. So I mean, you're like you're talking to the great majority of the leaders in those churches.
Well, in today's survey world, where
Yeah,
we are all over
yeah,
surveyed, you go on a trip and the hotel wants to know how do we
that's
do,
right.
and the rental car
That's right.
company wants to know how
We
did we
do
do,
one.
and there is just a muteness to surveys today. And so to get someone to invest the time and
Yeah.
participate, by the way, the best incentive always to participate in a survey is the carrot of, and we will show you what the findings
Oh, nice.
are,
Very cool.
because we all want to know, am I normal? In other words, well, let me tell you, we ask, just as a case in point in the study, and by the way, it's a free download.
Yeah,
Just go to Megachurch
yeah,
Resurgence, Google
yeah.
Megachurch Resurgence, Hartford Institute,
We'll put the
and
link
it's
in.
Hartford Institute for Religion Research, and you'll get it. But
Yeah, yeah.
we said, hey, let's take 20 things that might have changed coming out of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And just tell us, did they go up? Did they
Mm-hmm.
stay the same? Or did they go down since the pandemic?
Yeah,
The number one, the highest rating of those was the spiritual interest of young adults
yeah,
impacted by our community,
yeah,
by our church, sorry.
yeah,
Second was adding value to your local community.
yeah,
Third was raising the bar of discipleship. And fourth was training Christ followers to make other
yeah,
disciples.
yeah.
Now, we all lie and speak optimistically on our polls, but even if we're only even if all we're doing is affirming our aspirations,
Right.
these are awesome,
Yeah, exactly.
awesome
Right.
values to see what's happening.
Yeah.
And to now back to my point, for people to say, well, we're kind of seeing a lot of interest in young adults. Are others? And the survey can say, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
you're not
Yeah.
alone. Or, Dave, for your world, we are having an increased use of residents.
Yeah.
Are we all by
Yeah.
ourselves?
Exactly.
No.
Right.
3/4
Sure.
of large churches have some kind of active residency, whatever you call it,
Yeah.
program involving several months and certain commitments that we outlined in the question. You're
Right.
welcome to find, I think I have a graphic just on the residencies. But that causes people to say, oh,
Yeah.
then we're going on a path that seems to be having fruit in other areas. And I bet if I talk to my pastor friends, that's something they may be into, where they can give
Right.
me tips if they haven't already found Dave and Kristen's book, Who's the Next You?
What was for
How about
you?
that for product placement, Dave?
Oh,
Who's the next
ching,
you?
$200 to one. What's the most positive surprise? Was this like me and Claude? We've been reading this morning, going through it,
Sure.
and it's like it's
Okay, I'll
affirming.
answer that question if you answer that question after me.
Okay.
I was delighted to see the comeback, because remember, in the pandemic, large churches were hit the hardest, except in those
Yeah.
few states that didn't participate in the
Yeah.
pandemic. But large churches not only came back stronger, but they say their spiritual vitality, the
Yeah.
bar of discipleship, their evangelistic
Yeah.
passion, their outreach in the community is
Mhm.
all stronger now
Yeah.
than what it was before the pandemic. And that's why we called the title of it Megachurch Resurgence,
Resurgence.
because
Yeah.
it's like this is news, because you have all kinds of media who say, well, our large church is dead. No, actually, they're back stronger than ever. Are large churches just a baby boomer phenomenon?
Yeah.
Actually, we found out that if there are more senior pastors of megachurches who are Gen X or Gen Y millennial,
Yeah.
then there are boomers.
Yeah,
The
right.
baton is
Yeah,
passing.
it's passing.
There are new, very large churches going up. Now they tend to be multi-site, so they're a little harder to spot than the
Yeah,
gargantuan,
that's right.
multiple acre property.
It's
Go
cool.
ahead.
The diversity piece to me,
Ah,
there was some statistics there, and I see that. I see it's still, of course, hugely lagging and depends on where you're embedded in the kingdom and stuff. But I'm on a church plant here in Denver, and it's one of the core things, like where we are positioned in Denver, in Aurora in particular. It's just a high value going in. This young, and it's a bunch of young people, and I'm like the gray-headed guy in the back buying lunch for everybody, right? But so I'm playing that role on this church plant, but it is a high value and it is important. And I think you get around that generation and these some of these convictions are a little more real to them than it was to me when I was that age coming through the pipeline.
so the two most diverse groups racially
Yeah.
out there in terms of church types and sizes are church plants,
Yeah, sure.
where there's an intentional
Sure.
multi-ethnicity,
Right.
and large churches.
Yeah.
The larger the church, the more likely it is to be multi-ethnic. Now, what we don't know about large churches is it segregated within itself? Are the Filipino
Right.
nurses
Right.
hanging out with each other and the
Right.
Hispanic business owners hanging
Right.
out with each other? Yes, no, maybe so. We don't know. But we do know that they're all hanging out under the same roof together,
It's good.
on mission together, serving together.
Yeah.
And that's all really good, according to Revelation 5:7, that
Sure.
talks about every tongue and tribe and nation in heaven.
What did you hear on the other side? You were like, ooh, that's
Okay,
not good.
so just before we leave the diversity, there's
Yeah.
a chart that shows this survey has been done every 5 years since the year 2000.
Right.
And for a lot of the graphs, we say, all right, here's what, in this case, diversity was in the year 2000, 05, 2010,
Yeah.
2015, 2020, and now 2025. And it's been up with each time.
It's interesting.
The other one that's been just remarkably up is small group involvement, and we can come back to that.
Okay.
That would have been the other highlight, just to see that large churches do ministry by you get bigger by getting smaller.
Sure.
You do ministry most effectively in the team, in the group, and all. Now, what are areas of concern?
Yeah.
Um, there are always many. One cluster is with the leadership development,
Yeah.
and let's talk about the senior pastor in particular.
Yeah.
The larger the church, the more strategic that baton handoff of leadership is. When the long tenured,
Hmm.
the average
Yeah.
megachurch senior pastor is 15 years in
Yeah.
leadership. Average age is 62, which is about
Hmm.
the close to the average age
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
all Protestant pastors.
Yep.
But you're thinking, okay, there needs to be more intentionality and preparation. And of those that because I did a book with William Vanderbloemen on uh, passing the baton leadership
Yes.
called Next.
That's
And I did
minus
about
50. That's minus 50. I'm kidding.
that's about I did about 200 interviews
Wow.
on that.
Okay.
And and the when we see a pastor who has done a succession plan, a 40-year-old pastor who says, if I get hit by the bus,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
here's the plan,
Yeah.
short term, immediate, and long term, then those pastors become bolder
Hmm.
in saying, hey, everybody around here needs to be strengthening your leadership bench.
Yeah.
Staff, you need to be cultivating other
Yeah.
staff to replace you.
Yeah.
And at different levels, there are volunteers who are ministry, have a heart for ministry, could do more, and might
Hmm.
move from volunteer roles to
Hmm.
more time, which is usually the differentiator of bringing someone on paid staff. So that whole idea of succession embodying the need for more leadership development um, is a concern that the project raised, the
Yeah.
research raised, and this is where Dave the role of internships as
Yeah.
one more kind of more formalized
Yeah.
approach to leadership development is so crucial.
I think the medical industry, we always hold them up as an example of how to do this, right? They've known for a long time the teaching hospital mentality. And I heard a guy at a conference, a little guy, it wasn't a conference, a small gathering of churches. This was a long time ago. And he was the chief guy from Loyola. I think I quote him in that book. He says, there are hospitals and there are teaching hospitals, and you can be healed at both. You can have surgery at either one. But the teaching hospital mentality has a little extra mission to it. And you talk to people that come through that system, you could probably take out the word doctor and just put in pastor or minister or this idea of a field experience to match this wonderful education. I have a theory, Warren, that the leadership development thing, it's a size of organization problem. What do you think about this? You get even a large church with 3 dozen employees, that's a church of 2 or 3,000, right? They have maybe an HR person. And that HR person probably used to be the youth guy, or I don't know, they're not like you have to get sizable before you have a real HR person. And then a real second person in that department is like 80 employees when I get around these places. That's when an organization tends to get more serious about development, culture, and these things that we read about. And it's hard to get to that at a great church of 1,000 people with 10 employees. You hired them because they're awesome and they can get a lot done. You think there's anything to that? In other words, we always have drawn the line at 1250. It's like, what's the classic church that we work with about that size? We've worked with churches of 150. We've worked with churches of Crossroads is one of the largest in the country, 20 or 30,000. I don't know. But the ones that really they probably need it the most and it's the hardest is that church where there's about 10 people on the team, but they're all so busy. They are so busy. Do you think there's anything to that?
Well, first, going back to your hospital and teaching hospital, you both get healed, but the one has an additional mission. That is an outstanding metaphor. I love that.
Dr. Gregory Ozark from Loyola. You can quote him.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But to your latest point, I'd like to respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I'd like to suspect that whatever the size of church,
Mm-hmm.
the leadership can play a definite role in giving priority to leadership development.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it may not be formalized into a residency the way you and your book map
Yeah,
out.
for sure.
But from day one, if the pastor can be about bringing people along, intentionally, who has God given us that I can invite into greater responsibility, that I can coach, that I can pray for, that I can support, that I can encourage. And that looseness of the small church, the church plant level, becomes more formalized the bigger you become. But from day one of any size church, and whether that church is growing,
Yeah.
plateaued, or
Yeah.
declining, the role of leadership development, of building an apprentice culture,
Mm-hmm.
can fit everywhere and will do great benefit
For sure.
into that environment of the church.
It's been a big
After all,
learning.
we
Yeah.
are called to make disciples, and in a way, maybe a better translation is to make disciple makers.
Yeah.
And that doesn't wait until we get to a certain size
Good.
or formalness. That
Good.
needs to happen at every church from day one. And for every Christian. My wife and I were just talking earlier this week. We need to be praying about who we're going to apprentice next in the church plant that we're part of.
You're part of a church
And
plant?
yes, Christian Missionary Alliance.
In what town?
Um, just in the right where the New York, New Jersey border is.
Oh yeah.
And I have an identity crisis in that I've also served for many years on the board of a megachurch, Liquid
Yes.
Church, which is
Oh, for
also
sure. For sure.
in North New Jersey, has about 7 campuses.
Yeah. Been there.
So I live in both worlds, but our tithe, our volunteering,
It's great.
our where we take neighbors who will come with us to church is to the local church plant.
Yeah, that's fast. I didn't know you were a Christian Missionary Alliance guy.
Yes,
I've been around that for years. Good
a
for you.
great group.
Um, Future of education. I know church is your world, but it's hard to talk about leadership development, not talk about seminaries or colleges. It's a bad day to be in that business, right? Where do you see it going? The educational part of
Yeah.
leadership development in the church.
Um,
What's your prediction?
Seminaries are full of good people, good
Sure.
leaders,
Yeah.
and the students are getting good materials in
Right.
terms of, how do I craft a sermon? How do I better
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
the Bible? How do I get church history so that I'm not too myopic? How do I?
Yeah.
But that training was always meant to supplement
Right.
the life of learning in a local church,
Yeah.
which is why you see more and more, an increasing number of schools connecting with local churches. I think
Sure.
Southeastern University in
Sure.
Florida must have 50 different
Yeah.
church campuses,
That's
if
right.
you will,
That's right.
because then you don't have to move away. Then all the things you can get at your local church, you get. And then
Right.
those specialty things that the local church can't offer, that's where the seminary training comes in. So I see the future as a reintegration, a
Yeah.
coming back of academia
Yeah.
and church, in which both will become stronger.
We get asked a lot, the 20-year-old, what should I do? Or the person looking for a graduate level seminary education. And I love them all. I'm like, pick one you like and one that works when you click the button. It's for the online thing. It's like, should you spend, there's a cost, there's a cost to be counted on the education piece. It's, we talk about 7 ingredients that need to be apparent. It's the most costly and the easiest to do, really. I mean, it's the one we all understand. You got to be smart. You got to be a lifetime learner. Is that 60 grand or is it free? I don't know, right? But the future of that is it's scrambling for sure. On how do we prepare this? It's a big part of the puzzle, I think, of the future leader.
Well,
Gone are the days.
and
You got to be smart today. You got to be smarter than ever if you're going to be in ministry, you know?
And your book acknowledges that some residencies are done through schools and you
Yeah,
get
that's
the
right.
academic credit for it,
That's right.
and some are not.
Yeah,
And I suspect the future will have both
we will. Yeah,
streams
right.
as
Yeah.
well.
Um, what are you predicting is coming? What's coming the next time you run this survey? What are the trends? What's the leading edge trend? Multi-site is here to stay, I think.
Yeah, 20,
Normal.
because I'm in the middle of this multi-site study this year,
Yeah,
24 of the 25 largest attendance churches in the
yeah,
United States are
yeah,
multi-site.
for sure.
This report on megachurch resurgence talks about megachurches not only being multi-site, it was about 2/3, but then another 10% are actively looking into becoming multi-site. So
Yeah,
it is the direction, but it's not just multi-site is bigger than very large churches.
of course.
You have even church plants that say, well, why couldn't we have two locations or two languages in different locations or whatever. So the future is in some ways disconcerting in that large churches keep getting larger. Right now,
Yeah,
last weekend, of people who went to a Protestant church in the United States, 1 out of 3 went to a church of 1,000
Yeah.
attendants or higher.
Right.
1 out of 3.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, now the average church in America, the normal church in America,
Yeah.
is 65 people on a
I
Sunday.
know. I know.
Now, those are two very different worlds, and they each excel in different areas.
What does the Church of 65 excel in, Warren?
Relationship connections that
Really?
are
Are you
deep.
sure?
It has
I'm just messing with
research
I'm
wise.
just messing.
Okay. So, um, case in point,
Yeah.
over the weekend, I was chatting with a woman who introduced me to her friend that she had met at their church, and their church is under 100 in attendance.
Right.
And I said, well, that's really cool. And I asked the lady, well, how'd you get connected with the church? And she said, well, interestingly, I came just one Sunday and I mentioned to someone a
Mm.
prayer request about my
Mm.
husband who had had a fall and
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
in the hospital. And not only did she pray for me, but 3 days later, when I went to the hospital, I was riding up the elevator, and the woman next to me was from the church going to visit
Yeah.
my husband.
How about that?
That the level of, hey, we got a visitor
Yeah.
this
Right.
weekend.
Right.
Hey, visitor, how can we minister to their spirit?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that one's easy because she told us her husband was in the hospital.
That's so cool.
Well, Stephen Ministry or whatever their
Yeah.
team was for care, you think you can do this?
Right.
Well, a small church, of course, anybody can do that,
Right.
but more likely to do that is the smaller church that is outreach minded.
Mm.
Now, the danger of the smaller church is the inward focus on it's a wonderful fellowship. My best friends are here and all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that doesn't have the passion for, hey, we've got an empty seat that needs to be filled. Are we praying for that? Are we
Yeah.
praying for the harvest field? Are we praying
Yeah.
for our friends and loved ones and family who need to know the Lord? Larger churches have to do everything more systematically. They have to have greeters because, you can't
Right.
remember everybody's
That's
name. They
right.
have to have pathways
Right.
for how do I get connected in this
Yeah.
place? Because it doesn't just happen as
Yes.
organically as it can in a smaller church if someone sponsors you,
Yeah. Yeah.
as my friend did with this guest.
Do you think a lot of it's the church? We're always a little behind, right? Culture. But there's fewer independently owned delis today. There are fewer there are no independently owned hardware stores. It's really hard to make it in the restaurant business, but there's a lot of Chili's. There's a lot of chains. There's a lot of Red Robins or this idea of where it's gone culturally. Do you think this is our mission field. This is who we are. When I'm in Boston or I'm in Phoenix, a grande Pike Place with just a little bit of ice. That's how boring my drink is. I know it's the same, right? And you take that mentality now and transfer it into your church world. We want to know what this experience is going to be. So the small we in the market, you would say the small mom and pop really struggling, whether it's a hardware store or a restaurant or a bookstore. But the other big box stuff, the online is, do you think where we are is just a cultural response because that's who we are as a people in this country? Or is it more than that?
Churches do well never to confuse their mission with their methods,
Yeah.
not to marry the two.
Yeah.
Right now, the method of big box stores, big,
Yeah.
chain this and
Yep.
all works. And so churches that are big, that there's a comfort zone from the culture. 50 years ago, if you looked at the first list that were created of the largest churches, they were always first church this. Almost all of them were
Yeah.
first denominational,
Yeah.
Baptist, Assemblies of God, whatever, Christian church this. Well, today's church names, You don't have the first, second, third,
Yeah. Right.
and you don't generally have the denominational name in it
Right. Right.
because back then, hey, I'm a Presbyterian. I've just moved to town. What am I going to look for? Other Presbyterian churches. That kind of loyalty
Yeah.
is not in our culture today.
Yeah.
The culture today is I like a unique name. So, Dave,
Right.
what's the name of your church plant?
Movement.
Okay, that's not First Blank Church. It's
Warren,
movement.
it's movement, and they took the vowels out. So it's MVMNT. Move because it's
Okay,
cool. It's cool.
so that cool personalization very much represents today. So why
Yeah.
not leverage that?
Yeah.
But that's a method.
It's a
It
method.
could be that if Jesus doesn't return 50 years from now, having some kind of historical identity is much preferred by people. And so you're going to have all
Yeah.
these churches either renaming themselves or the church plants
Yeah.
pioneering historic names. Who knows?
Yeah.
So in certain ways, it's kind of the Paul, when in Romans, do as the Romans do in order
Exactly.
to
Good
reach people
point.
for the gospel.
Yes.
If it doesn't matter theologically, go with the culture.
Mhm.
If that causes fewer bridges to cross for people to hear the life-changing good news about Jesus, who is unchanging.
That's great. What do we need to know about Warren? But what have I not asked you, Warren? What should I have asked you? We're going to close with this. I'm going to give you the last word here, which is hard for me to do, as you know. I'm a talker.
Um, a lot of people say with research, what do I do with this? This is interesting to learn
Yeah.
that the trend towards small groups has increased,
Yeah.
that multiracialness is on the up, that
Yeah.
the use of residencies
Yeah.
is on the up. Okay, what do I do with that? And the answer is most churches can do like one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So it's a question of is to pray and discuss and say, is God calling us to be, let's just use the multiracial,
Mm-hmm.
more multiracial? Okay, what are these churches doing to
Mm-hmm.
become more multiracial? I'll tell you the answer to that. It's an intentionality.
Sure.
It's on our platform,
Yep.
on our board,
Yeah.
um, in the visible roles in the congregation, that we are modeling what we believe the kingdom of God is like. We are teaching that at different appropriate points.
Yeah.
We are validating it. We are cheering it. We are welcoming it. And lo and behold, look out a year from now, and
Yeah.
we are a more diverse
Yeah.
congregation. So, so the challenge that I'd like to pass on is, so take this report, take a look at it. There are 35 different graphics, each with a different headline, each telling kind of a different story on a different area. Pray and say, Lord, is there some area that we could grow in, that you want our particular church to do so?
Right.
And can we learn from others who have gone ahead of us or figured out this particular challenge a little better than we have at present? And the word disciple means learner.
Mm.
And I think we should always not say I should become like someone else just because they
Yeah.
are, bigger or whatever.
Yeah.
But is there something I can learn from this group and not dismiss and say, well, it could never happen
Right.
here.
Right.
Our church is just
Yeah.
a whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, if with that kind of fatalism,
Yeah.
um, a church will stay. We are just a,
Mm-hmm.
but if there is a fresh vision, especially for the harvest field, for reaching all our unchurched friends, neighbors, and acquaintances, and this leadership that says, what can we do next in that direction? There's a lot you can learn from any size
I love
church. and any kind of study.
I love it. Warren Bird, you're a gift, and you have been. I see prepare your church for the future right behind your head. That marked me and a bunch of my friends for 20 years back in the day. And so keep doing your thing, asking the questions and boiling it down so, C minus undergrad junkies like me can understand that it's a gift to the kingdom. Thanks for doing
Well,
it.
you are on the front lines, as is your pastor and my pastor, and
Yeah.
putting tools in their
Yeah.
hands so that they can go farther, further, faster for Jesus. That's what it's all about.
WarrenBird.com. We'll drop the link. We'll drop the link to the studies. Look for the multi-site thing that's coming. Thanks for the time, man. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you, Dave. Thanks.